So I think a good place to start this podcast, because there's a slightly different location in your background for the audio listeners. Where are you?
South of sunny France in Cannes. Change of pace from home, taking a break from work, but still getting some done writing. You know how it is. You know what it is being a sort of workaholic, being sort of driven to do the stuff you love to do, even when you're probably not supposed to. But yeah, it's nice. Sunny, which isn't something I'm used to. I'm not built for the heat, my skin. But yeah, it's nice. The only downside, as I said, is these echoey walls, which are messing up the audio. But yeah, pretty nice change of pace, I have to say. Taking a page out of your book, what I was going to say.
When you go on holiday or you go for a break or a weekend away, what does your schedule look like in regards to work? Because I know you're someone that works kind of quite candidly anyway. So do you dial things in a couple of to-do lists, for example, and then tick it off and then just relax? What does that look like for you?
Nah, it's still pretty loose. I mean, yeah, that's how I normally like to work, just a bit sporadically whenever I feel like it. Obviously not working to the same lengths and amounts and hours that I do on a normal basis, but just chip it in wherever I feel like it. I think the creative spark, whenever that just comes to me, that's when I start to go. Even last night we had a massive, just because it was I'm not going to bore the listeners too much, but it was my mum's 60th and there was a bunch of middle-aged people who I had to waffle to for about a few hours. Then I just randomly got the creative spark in the middle of that. Just had to go off and just sit in here and just write for about an hour, just because things were coming to me that I needed to get written down. But then it goes both ways equally. Like 2 hours after that, I had nothing. I had nothing in my brain, and I gave up. I just left it, shut the laptop, and just went and relaxed and enjoyed the heat.
Have you had any nice pastries or any dishes to write home about yet? Tell me.
Been all over
divulge.
All over it.
Yeah,
all over it. Nothing. Pan of chocolate. Or there's probably a different term for them in other countries, but yeah, chocolate pastries, croissants, all of that, and a load of caffeine as well, coffee, tea, pretty good, and a lot. Yeah, I'm blessed to be here. It's nice. It's a nice change of pace, as I said, because I think the problem is with what we do in particular, and more so how it's been for me, because obviously you've been able to travel and network and do all of these things, and I think your opportunities lend themselves more towards that. For me, it's a lot more in one place, if you will, working hard, sitting at my desk, working in one place. And obviously I do enjoy the process. I love the creative process, but it's nice to even just be working from a different location. I think it's just, yeah, I get something out of that. So I understand the whole travel perspective now. So that's probably something I want to do a little bit more. And obviously I have a setup now. The blessing of what we do is we can do it wherever we want, really. Content creation, you don't need too much, especially in this day and age, to start producing. So it's a blessing. So it's nice, yeah.
Well, you said about a lot of caffeine, which I think is quite a nice natural segue into this weekend's card, because it actually started at 3 a.m. for me. So it was a bit of a tricky one, because then I had to balance that on top of the PFL card, which was taking place, which I happen to know quite a few people on it. So I was quite interested to see how a lot of those ones turned out. We had incredible knockout with Chanel Dyer. There are a few other very good standout performances. But the card this weekend had a couple of major talking points, some of it through skill and some of it through controversy. So let's start with the controversy aspect first, because I think I've got maybe an unpopular opinion on that. But I want to get your take on it. The Imavov and Cannonier finish, of course, was doing the rounds. But what did you think of that as a whole?
What, the stoppage or the card as a whole?
The stoppage mainly, because the rest of the card was flat. Let's be honest, up until the
that's where I was going to go with
card, there was nothing really happening. So the main card had some good finishes and some good fights. So let's not mess about with the rest of it that clogged up that card. Let's have a look at the main spots. But I want to get your thoughts on the main event, because that's probably the major talking point from this weekend.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one, because I saw a lot of the discourse online as well. Jason Herzog is probably consensus right now the best rep in the game over the last couple of years. I think he rarely really puts a foot wrong. I will say it was an early stoppage. I don't think you can really dispute that. Cannonier was definitely still hanging in there. Is it as problematic as everyone seems to be making out to be? It's hard to say. I from a career perspective, I understand it, because Cannonier is, in the latter stages of his career. He doesn't have much time left at the top, and really if he won that fight, you know, you'd be asking if he's getting the title shot or not. That seems to be the way it would probably have gone. And now that's a loss on his record, which realistically it means I don't know if he's going to get to the belt again, another title shot. And that's the fine margins this sport has. So it does affect these fighters a lot when you get a bad decision like that. As the stoppage goes, I don't think it's bad as everyone says it is. I think you could see he was rocked, but it's tough, isn't it? It's tough because he didn't go down and he was still hanging in there. So that's obviously where the backlash is coming in on Herzog's part. But again, I'm still torn on it. I've watched it back quite a few times now, and I honestly, I can't fully make up my mind on it. But I definitely don't agree with the level of vitriol it's sort of had. We've definitely seen worse stoppages before. But again, he does need to be held accountable. I'll kind of fence sitting here, but you know, it's tough. It's a tough one. What do you think?
I think the fact that you watched it back many times and was still somewhat trying to interpret it from different angles is probably a fair representation of this, because like you said, he is the very best. He is the golden standard. And he even came out and said on evaluation of watching it on the screens and having the foresight or the hindsight, of replays, it was early. I don't think there's any debate that it was early. I think the debate comes from people need to understand. I say this with judging all the time, but people need to understand watching it on a TV screen and being there in real life, especially from a referee's perspective, is two very different things, because there is an angle and a viewpoint to the game that a referee gets that no one else sees. They see very, very small details to fights that we don't have the access to. So the reason I say that's important is because Chris Curtis was even sitting cage side and said the same thing. He said from his perspective and from what he was seeing with the body language and the eyes of Cannonier and what was happening, it looked like a bang-on stoppage. He didn't even realize it was relatively early until he went on Twitter a couple of moments later. And Jason Herzog said the same thing, right? He said from his perspective at the time, it seemed like the right decision. On reflection on the cameras, it looked a bit early. I think that's the major point, because when you see someone that turns away from the action, doesn't have eyes on their opponent 3 different times within the same sequence, they haven't really defended themselves that intelligently, and big shots are landing, and you turn away 3 different times, I think you're really asking for a stoppage. So you're 100% right with everything you said. It was a big moment. These small margins do redefine careers. But like you said, I don't think it's quite as hectic as everyone is making out. While still early, I think there's definitely an angle where you can see why he's done what he's done. So I don't think it was that cynical at the end of the day. Of course, it's easy for me to say that because I don't have half my pay cut. I don't have the opportunities stripped away from me, so that's a lot easier. But I definitely think it sort of sets us up for an Imavov, Brendan Allen fight for the #1 contendership in the middleweight division. What do you reckon about that?
Yeah, makes sense to me. I mean, obviously, you got Whittaker and Chimaev circling somewhere in there, obviously fighting in a couple of weeks' time, so obviously the division's going to be moving a fair bit, so we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, I like the sound of that. It's a good little matchup. Imavov, Brendan Allen. For the #1 contender spot, though, I'm not quite sure. I feel like Whittaker versus Chimaev, I feel like one of those two will probably.
But that's already done.
Shot.
That's already been done.
Is that true? Is that confirmed? Well, you say that, but when Chimaev fought Usman, he was meant to get a title shot, and that didn't happen. So it's hard to say.
Let's put asterisks on that, because I think going into that fight, it was meant to be for the title, permitting that something memorable happened. Nothing memorable happened. It wasn't a necessarily standout performance from Chimaev. So things moved on pretty quickly. There was bigger fights to make. I think permitting there is a very conclusive outcome to Bobby Knuckles and Chimaev. I think that gets done for the title. And then I think behind that, we have a Brendan Allen Imavov type matchup, which then secures that sort of next spot. I think both guys still need another fight. Maybe it's not necessarily that matchup, but I think a #1 contendership fight or that sort of matchup is probably the next step.
Yeah, I'm with that. Yeah, with that. What about the rest of the card? What did you think? Obviously, Dominic Reyes getting back in the wing column. I expected him to. I had a little hunch he would. I'm not going to sit here and say the performance was stellar but beating a pretty credible kickboxer in Justin Jacoby, I have to say, that is an impressive feat. So you have to give him the praise, really. And it's a feel-good story, isn't it, really? A guy who was down and out, first win since, is it even 2019, his first win? Because obviously he didn't actually get the W against John Jones as much as we probably think he deserved it. So it's great to see him back in the win column. And you can tell how much it meant to him too. And hopefully, you never know, we know how cruel this game is, but we also know how surprising it is. So who knows, maybe we'll see Dominic Reyes back in the title picture in the near future. I don't think he's far away as everybody thinks he is.
Yeah, Dom Reyes having that knockout was definitely top 3 feel-good moments over the last couple of years. And that's nothing against Dustin Jacoby. He's always fun to watch, always in there with the very best competition. But if you're a fight fan and you've been following Dom Reyes' journey for a little while, you know as well as anyone, that man deserves a win, because even when he's lost in devastating fashion, you watch the Yuri Bahashka fight, there's always moments in these fights where it's such on a knife edge for him. He even knocked out Yuri Bahashka in that particular fight, but it's just Yuri is just an absolute freak of nature. So it definitely propels him back in and around those sort of conversations, because he hasn't necessarily gone anywhere in regards to star power. I think Anthony Smith is the fight to make.
Perfect matchup. I love that. That makes sense. I think you look at an Anthony Smith matchup, and then maybe you start looking at that top 5. I feel like you have to, and then maybe it's only two fights for a title shot, and yeah, who knows? And he's always had that skill. He has offensively. I think the problem is he just leaves his chin open. Now, I think I still saw that in the Jacoby fight, and in that division, you know, you can't risk that. You just can't, because at heavyweight and light heavyweight, I feel like there's just that significant power jump where it really doesn't take as much to get a finish compared to those lower divisions. So I don't know whether I see him lifting a belt. You know, I would love to. I would love more than anything for that to happen. We'll have to wait and see, though. I don't know. I love the sound of an Anthony Smith fight, though. Gets me excited. Anything else that stood out to you on that card? Obviously, was it Radke that got the finish, or did he get finished? I can't remember. The knee.
No, he got brutally finished. That was actually a really,
my bad.
Really, really nice finish, actually. And that stepping knee from the southpaw position, we've seen it quite recently from Conor McGregor's most recent sparring footage. And he released a clip which was very, very similar with that, which all comes off of the lead hand battle in the southpaw position. But yeah, that knee straight to the liver, that was absolutely beautiful. And Charles Radke was coming off a good win and quite a viral piece of airtime in regards to what he'd done on the mic after his last win against Urbina, I believe it was. So yeah, that was an impressive win. We had the Brazilian Hulk, who again didn't get out the first round, and we got that incredible spinning elbow. And what I thought even made it even more impressive was the fact that in that same sequence, but quite a few exchanges before, he landed it perfectly off of the other side. Things unraveled and materialized, and then he lands it even better off of the other side and then gets one of the KOs of the year. And that man's a problem. I think the difficulty for him is going to be when someone gets past that first round, because you could see him start getting tired, because he is so heavily muscled, because he does put everything into every shot, because when he does, he puts people out. So it's a risk to reward, right? But it's just going to take someone that sort of can stab him from the outside, maybe with teach, maybe with a jab, maybe some body work, gets into the second or maybe the third. And that's when we're going to really see what this man's capable of doing at 185 pounds. But definitely a big win. Another fun addition. And talking about fun additions, actually, this isn't what I thought I was going to go into, but bringing over arguably the biggest star in Japanese mixed martial arts right now, from Risen into the bantamweight division, and now we're talking about the likes of a Petr Yan matchup for his debut. I am very excited about that, because I was saying only yesterday about, of course, anyone that knows me knows my love of Japan. I need an excuse to go. I need a work excuse to go. And unfortunately, the timelines for the bare knuckle Risen has just slid. So this is what I've got my eyeballs on. Let me know what you think about this one, because this is actually quite big news, to be honest.
I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I have an encyclopedic knowledge of this man, but the hype around him over the last few days, I can't seem to escape that this news, just this one piece of news alone from various sources just keeps popping up in my feed. And obviously that's a testament to how big of a deal it is. And I think, it's almost akin to that sort of signing that PFL managed to sort of sign Paul Hughes. I guess it's sort of not on that level, but the same level of fanfare. Obviously UFC this time got their man, and you're going to have to fill me in on how good this guy really is, because I did read, when I read that they were going to give him a top 5 matchup, I was like, okay, we must be talking something pretty serious here.
Yeah, he's on an impressive win streak. He's got a lot of high... The thing is with him as well is he's faced a lot of high-level guys. I believe he's already faced Manel Kape, which is quite interesting.
Yeah,
I actually think he got finished by him. But you have a look at the people on his resume. He's got the likes of... always butcher his pronunciation. Horiguchi. Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah,
obviously that Pettis knocked out back in the day. So if you have a look at the guys he's faced, it's of a high caliber. So it's not as if he's going to come into the UFC and be sort of starstruck by these names. So the thing that I find interesting about this is the way that the UFC are operating on their sort of recruitment processes these days, because they've kind of set up this idea where they have the likes of Dana White Contender Series, where they look to bring in the best talent on the more regional scene and then look to build them up before they've even got into the UFC. So, of course, what they can do with that is begin to storytell very early in their career, but then also they get them on nice contracts. And then but it's true, right? And then
it's true. It's true.
And what I'll say to that, actually, let me actually just touch on that, because people like to think that, okay, you go through on Dana White's Contender Series and you're put on a low contract of 10-10 and then they keep you tied to that. That's not necessarily the case. You reap what you sow, and you look at Sean O'Malley. And Sean O'Malley went from 10-10 on his first fight. He doubled it in his second fight, so he went to 20-20. And then I think his third or fourth fight, he was already fighting for 40-40. And that's unheard of, right? But it just goes to show that if you're the right type of performer, if you do the right things and you maximize that spotlight, they're happily going to pay you a lot more than those original contracts. You just have to make it worth it for them, because they make absolutely no money off you probably from the marketing when you're on 10-10 and no one knows you and you're fighting an unranked guy. So there's big potential to be there. And if I'm someone that's in the more regional scene, I think the Dana White's Contender Series is arguably the best way to come up, because what you're doing is you're going into one of their premier products, and you'll always hear about how Dana White loves that series more than anything. So they want to promote the guys on there. They want to promote, not you're just going into this system and they're trying to churn out. No. They want to promote you. So I think it's a very, very good platform. But it comes back to what I was saying in regards to the recruitment. You either go through the Dana Whites, or now, even with the top talent, for the most part, they're kind of saying, right, you can come to the UFC, or if you go elsewhere, not too fast, and we'll probably pick you up in a couple of years at a better rate, right? So it kind of just shows again quite how dominant they are in the market, to be perfectly honest. It's not that we didn't know this already, right?
Yeah, I mean, I made the comparison yesterday when I was just yapping to a bunch of old people, as I said. I was trying to explain MMA. To be fair, this guy was, I wouldn't say he was even humoring me. He was clearly a combat sports fan. But I said that, the way the UFC sort of have just a complete domination over the market, as you said, it's almost like the way Apple have just complete, essentially ownership over the tech/phone market. It really is at that level, obviously on a collectively a smaller scale, but comparative to their rivals, if you even want to call them that, it's like night and day, right? So it shows you the power they have. And obviously I just made the comparison to Paul Hughes. I think that shows you how big of a coup that was, that a smaller promotion was able to get the man before the UFC, because we don't really see that happen too much at all. Yeah, I don't know. It's exciting times for the UFC. It never really isn't, I have to say. As an MMA fan, there's always something going on. Even when we're not necessarily having, barn burner pay-per-views, is over the last event or two. But plenty more to look forward to.
Throw a couple of topics at me.
Yeah,
from the mixed martial arts world.
To get them out. I mean, this is the one this is the first thing I was actually going to jump on, and I know you posted about this. I'm sure everybody has probably seen this. Probably the craziest thing I've ever seen in combat sports. You already know where I'm going with this. Eddie Hall, who I didn't even know was fighting in MMA, if you even want to call it MMA, because at this point it's so far gone from the conventional aspect of sport. You know, it's essentially, if you don't know, Eddie Hall was locked in a cage with two. They weren't even dwarfs. I thought they were, but they were two very just small men. And it were two.
No.
They were dwarfs, but
you have to remember who they're standing next to. They're standing next to Eddie Hall. This man's about flipping 200 pounds and 6 foot.
The reason I say that is because I saw someone say it. I saw someone say they were dwarfs. I was like, nah, they're not, right? But you're right. Eddie Hall is just a huge guy. And it went as probably as you would expect it to. Even in a 2v1, Eddie Hall knocked out the first guy, powerbombed him first, I might say, tossed him, slammed him on the ground, and then knocked him out with I have to say, quite a beautiful right hand. And I feel for the other guy, because you'd think, oh, maybe if he knocks out one, it would just be over, right? But no, they literally stand them up afterwards and make him 1v1, the little guy. I'm sorry, that is the last person on earth I'd ever want to be in that moment. And of course, it didn't last very long after that, if you saw. I don't know how that even got sanctioned, for one. That's the first thing I'll say. I don't know who's allowing that to even happen. And two, the fact I didn't even know about it, despite how sort of, I guess it really is appealing, as you want to say, a freak show fight. And I'm actually just going to segue this into my work that I've been doing recently. Obviously, I did a video on James Toney, who was the boxer who competed in MMA right now. MMA back in 2010, and that was my video I did this week. And I made the comparison of that being a freak show fight and it having that mass appeal in the same way that the original UFC tournaments did. That was what it was selling on. And that's never really changed, is what I've realized, is even in the modern era, we crave that. Look at the Misfits boxing, the general boxing versus MMA sort of space in general. It thrives on that sort of freak show edge that I guess other areas of the sport don't have. And you can see the Eddie Hall, you know, highlight reel knockout, if we even want to call it that. It's a bit of a joke to call it that, but look at the numbers it's been doing as an actual finish. The video of that actual knockout has exploded. It's everywhere. So there is the mass appeal, which makes it even more confusing as to why I don't really think anyone even knew about it before it happened. What did you think?
I don't think you need to know about it before it happens, to be perfectly honest. I don't think there's any need. Of course, it was a pay-per-view event, so that event was actually behind a paywall. But realistically, not a lot of people are going to be paying for that. So I don't think that structure is that important. But the reason I say it's not that important, you know, is happening, is because you're going to see the residual effects from it, right? You're going to see the highlight clips. You're going to see this man get absolutely flatlined. And that's exactly what happened. So I know there's a little bit of pushback on it because it does feel somewhat cheap that you're creating these absolute freak shows, like you put it, and then just profiting off of the virality on the back end. I think we see this a lot in Russian promotions, where a lot of the face-offs, they're just having crazy scraps, and then they do very similar things. But if you can get it sanctioned, of course it's going to annoy the purists, but it is what it is, and this is the game you play. And make no mistake, there are very, very real consequences on the lines for these guys, because I don't know if that man knew what he was signing up for, because if he did, he didn't really think it through. Because as long as someone gets finished, you are then having to face Eddie Hall by yourself. So now you're actually taking a very regularly sized human being against an absolute beast. And that was never, quite literally, the beast. That was never really going to end very well. Very good. Talking about not ending very well, I've got to talk on this because I don't think you were necessarily going to bring it up. And this is what I've been most engrossed in over the last 2-3 weeks. And it is in your realm. So I want to get your just complete candid take on everything that is unraveling.
Intrigued to me.
ADCC versus CGI. JI.
Is this the Craig Jones stuff? I literally just saw this about 15 minutes ago.
Are you telling me you're not up to date on it?
No, I hadn't seen it. I haven't really been on Twitter the last few days. I just saw this before we recorded. So
you don't need to be on Twitter for the last couple of days. You just need to be in the MMA space for the past month whatsoever. Joe Rogan, every platform, every podcast, anywhere.
I saw the death threat thing, which is crazy. I'll let you lead then. Fill the audience in and the listeners in on.
This is unequivocally the biggest thing to ever happen in Jiu-Jitsu history.
Yes.
Bar none. The biggest things happen in Jiu-Jitsu history. You're taking a sport that the mainstream do not know. You're taking a sport that, for the most part, no one cares of in mainstream sport. Like, that's literally just the reality. And it has been shaken on its head. So the context for the listeners, or for anyone, is you have ADCC, which is the Abu Dhabi Jiu-Jitsu World Cup / Olympics, if you like. That's how it's branded. That's how it's represented. It's the biggest event. However, the structure of the event has been growing over the last few years, and it's bigger than it's ever been. They've rented out the T-Mobile Arena for it this year, but the event is also behind a paywall. Now, the controversy has come because Craig Jones, one of the most divisive and one of the most enigmatic figures in the sport, said that he didn't want to do the event because basically financially for him it didn't make sense. You have to win 4 matches in the event, and then if you win the overall thing, you get $10,000. So this is essentially for the World Cup of grappling, which is absolutely nothing. So even if you were to extract those 4 super fights, which there'll be, and do them individually on, say, a UFC Fight Pass, you're going to be making exponentially more money. The time it takes, the camp, all of these different things, 10,000 is almost insulting. So essentially what Craig Jones has gone and done has set up his own event called Craig Jones Invitational, the CGI, and he has made an under 80s division, an over 80s division, and he's put $1 million prize money on both tournaments. And he has also put $10,001 just to partake. So anyone that is taking a part in the tournament will be receiving more money than if they won ADCC. They've completely restructured the whole event in regards to the rules and how they score. So they're trying to cater it more for an MMA audience. So they're sort of using a 10-point must system. They're also taking a good slice from Karate Combat, where they're putting it in a pit-like structure so it can sort of eradicate what you get in a lot of jiu-jitsu tournaments, which is a lot of breaking up in play because they either go off the mat or they fall into the judges. So not only is it dangerous, but it also breaks up a lot. So now you have the pit structure. So it's almost no need for intervention from the referee, which increases the speed. And he has also, this is the big kicker, done it on the exact same weekend as the ADCC. So the grappling world has completely been turned upside down, where there is all this drama, all this moral dilemma, all this back and forth between people essentially migrating from the ADCC to the Craig Jones Invitational. And the last thing I'll say is, on the back end of this, of course, you have one of the best marketers in combat sports, Craig Jones, spearheading this. That has been on every podcast. He's been on Joe Rogan, and he's been doing the rounds on social media where he's doing crazy metrics for this. And what's the best part? He's putting it free on YouTube, because his debate is they are never even shown the metrics of these. So they don't even have any leverage on the back end because they don't know what views they're generating. So it's going on YouTube. It's going to be free. It's going to have complete transparency throughout the event, and it's going to blow the jiu-jitsu world wide open. That is the context from start to finish of what is happening. And the last thing I will mention is jiu-jitsu is full of freaks. It's full of weirdos, and it is full of very, very strange individuals across the world. And this event and all the animosity between kind of two sides that are representing either side is just opening Pandora's box from some of the characters in this sport. And I don't want to get banned off of the platforms. I won't necessarily touch on some of the things that are going on, but best believe it is very entertaining. So that is from 0 to 100, everything that is happening.
I have to give you a little mini applause though. That was a damn good summary. Give you flowers there. Very well done. Yeah. I mean, I didn't know about half of that. I only just caught the back end of that, because I think something you didn't actually mention was, I don't know if this is what you're actually referring to, but what I said earlier about the death threats. The creator of ADCC was sending death threats to Craig Jones, who in response probably responded in the most Craig Jones way possible by showing a video of, forgive me, I can't remember his name, but the founder of ADCC choking out a woman unconscious in an instructional, despite the fact she was tapping, which is wild. I watched this about 10 minutes ago before we jumped on the call, and I couldn't really believe what I was seeing. So I don't know how that hasn't got out before, but Craig Jones with a bit of a trump card. And to be honest, I guess it just tells you that money really talks. It really does. But I think you need change like that. As my biggest critique of jiu-jitsu, particularly in the competitive scene, is maybe, as you said, a lot of the characters in it are bad eggs. They're not very good people. Say a lot of controversial things that
I don't think
maybe a lot
bad
of people
people.
don't agree with.
I just think there's a lot of weirdos.
That I agree with. Also, there's a lot of cheating and stuff, and steroid accusations and usage, but that's a whole nother kettle of fish. But I think the main thing is, it's very static and it's not very exciting. And you look at what Karate Combat are doing, as you said, it's not surprising that Craig has taken a page out of their book, because they're flipping the game, they're changing the game. Same way stuff like Misfits was successful. Misfits Boxing, obviously, I'm referring to, because it's different, it's engaging, and it's a departure from the conventional nature of a given sport. And I expect with whatever Craig chooses to do, it will differ, and it will be exciting, and it will be more engaging than the status quo. Because I'll be the first to say, even as a lover of the sport of jiu-jitsu, and I think most people would say this, it's not that exciting to watch. It isn't. So unless you're obsessed with the technical side of it, and you know the ins and outs, you know, in the same way you might be with MMA, it's not the most fun to watch. And I think that's fair to say. I think a lot of people would agree with that. So I'm glad Craig is, I guess, grabbing it by both reins, grabbing the sport by both reins and saying, I'm going to do something about this. I'm going to make it my own, and paying people what they deserve on top of it. So yeah, I'll definitely be tuning in. Do you know when it is, actually? That was one thing I was going to ask.
It's in August. And I think one of the most important things to bear in mind is what's getting missed by the side that are just completely standing with ADCC is this is good for the sport and its entirety. And if ADCC adapt and they use this to sort of open their eyes of where they can change things, they will still always have the prestige that is associated to that event, because it's been in the foundations of the sport. But the point that Craig Jones makes, which is very relevant, is it is branded as the Olympics. And it kind of is to a certain extent. But the Olympics, if you have an Olympic gold medal, you have worldwide recognition. That is not the case in Jiu-Jitsu. If you have an ADCC medal and you walk up to a randomer in the street, in probably most countries outside of maybe Brazil and some parts of America, no one knows what that is. It holds
I'd even
no
say the same
weight.
about the Olympics. Not that it doesn't hold weight, but like Olympians aren't as known as they used to be for the most part.
No. But you're missing my point. It's not the Olympian is not well known, because I agree with you. If you walk up past a gold medal in the Olympics, you probably wouldn't know who that person is. But if they were to tell you they have a gold medal in the Olympics,
okay.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
It has a certain level of understanding worldwide. It doesn't matter what country you were in. If I were to say I'm a gold medalist in the Olympics, everyone knows what that is, even if they didn't know who I was. So my point is not that they don't know who they are. That's of course a part of it, but they don't even know what ADCC is. It holds no bearing. And the point that Craig Jones is making, which is quite interesting, is it doesn't have much response to your career. You can't charge necessarily that much more for your instructionals, especially for a lot of these guys who are not English native speaking. So a lot of the money in jiu-jitsu comes from things like instructionals. And a lot of these guys don't necessarily even have that angle because they don't even speak English as a first language. There's a lot of elements to it, but a super interesting thing which is happening to the sport anyway, and I kind of wanted to get your takes on it. So I'm glad that we touched upon that. But yeah, throw throw something else my way, young Lee.
Yeah, I was actually going to touch on this. You've probably seen this. I don't know what the series is actually called on you. I think it's on YouTube. Yeah. I'm seeing a lot of the clips from it circulating on Twitter. I don't know if you know where I'm going with this, but the UFC have been doing a load of behind the scenes work, and almost it seems like to their own detriment. It's what they say. Do you know what I mean? Every single one of these clips I'm seeing seems to be putting the company and the brass, Hunter Campbell, Dana White, in a worse light than before. And I think the most infamous one, which I keep seeing clips from, is the whole saga behind Aljamain Sterling's return at UFC 292, where he took a short turnaround to fight Sean O'Malley in a fight he was almost doomed to lose. And he said for months before that his hand was forced. And it almost feels like he was right the entire time. I always agreed with him, and he got a lot of hate back then, and we were always stout defenders of the man. So I'm glad to see him at least in some capacity, vindicated. But it's a shame to see, I guess, how things like that go. But I will say it's undeniably engaging, because it's not a side of the sport we see a lot. We've said so many times on here that it's the behind the scenes, it's the stuff you don't see, which is infinitely more interesting, because, we're not used to that. We're used to the cage door being shut, Bruce Buffer bellowing out, whatever words, and two people slugging it out for 15 or 25 minutes. So when we do get these little peek behind the curtain, it's exciting. It's exciting, and I hope they do more of that. I think the UFC in particular, just before I'll throw it back to you, is they're stepping up their YouTube game a lot more. Something I've picked on. Obviously, I do a lot of research into content creation ideas and what I'm looking for, and sometimes that just leads me down the UFC YouTube channel rabbit hole. I noticed they've changed their thumbnails a lot, been really trying to, I guess, shift and evolve. Obviously it's little things you notice like that, but also the muted series they do, where they're showing knockouts and highlights and fights without the commentary, just the sound of the corner and, chin to chin, if you will. And that's equally as exciting. So I like what they're doing, just in terms of evolving their social media game, particularly on the YouTube front of things. But what do you think about that series? Forgive me for misplacing the name, because I'm sure someone will correct me in the comments, or you even know it. But what did you think?
So it's interesting that you mentioned about them stepping up their YouTube game, because I happen to know one of the editors, which is in charge of a lot of the incredible work that's been going on at the moment. He's called Killian Sexton. And I speak to him quite often, to be honest, and does incredible work. And you see a lot of the things that he's been doing recently have been going very, very viral. You mentioned a couple there. We've been obviously seeing the full career recaps of certain fighters, Dustin Poirier, the likes of Conor McGregor, and different things like this. And you're bang on. They're continually upping their game on that. But yeah, this new series is fascinating. I believe it's on Roku TV. I don't know how to get full access on it. No, it's not on YouTube at the moment in the UK, but I will look into that for sure, because it is super fascinating. And like you said, it's sort of almost to their detriment. That's what I find quite interesting, because you're not wrong. And obviously they had power over what they were filming and what was going out. So it's clear that the UFC don't mind it going out. And you kind of understand why, because even if there are parts to it that don't necessarily always paint them in the best light, I don't think they care too much. I think the exposure it's bringing, the engagement it's bringing, is almost forgotten very quickly. Think of how many things the UFC have brushed under the carpet over the years. And what, you think that a couple of conversations which kind of looks like they're steering a fighter in a way of a fight is going to have any ramifications? I don't believe so. I think they're just confident in the fact that this is just going to do good numbers, good engagement figures, and people are just going to continue as they are. And I think that's probably the way that it's going to go, to be honest. And it was funny reading all the feedback on it, because people seem to be so shocked that Aljamain Sterling was pretty much on the money. And I just find that funny, because if you listen to any of his podcasts, it's so obvious that he's just very transparent, he's very candid, he's very fair in his analysis for anything, not just his own career. And I pretty much always take his word at gospel, because he says things on his podcast and in his build-ups, that does him no favours. I've heard him talk about sort of injuries that he's had or how he's being prepared. His preparation has been lackluster because of a few things. Things that you think, yeah, that's not the greatest to put out. But it just speaks to his level of transparency, and that's always been the case. So, yeah, it wasn't any surprise to me.
Man of integrity.
For sure.
When we get him on, as I said, he'd be my dream guest. When we get him on in the future, I'm sure we can pick his brain on that. That will happen. I always say it's a matter of
100%.
Stuff like that. It's a matter of when, not if. But yeah, no, definitely something serious. And I think that, you know, I actually wrote this pretty much word for word in the script I'm writing right now. I'm doing a casuals guide to 303, and I guess this can be a nice little segue into some creative stuff we're doing. But just quickly, just to finish off on that previous topic, was I said any publicity is good. I say that a lot, you know, maybe in different words in my scripts, but the message is always there. I always say that, particularly in this game. It's one of the rare sports where you can afford to be the bad guy and you can afford to have a bad reputation. It won't cost you your career necessarily. And I think, you know, it's even more only prevalent when you're Dana White or Hunter Campbell, because no one's going to challenge you. No one's going to contest that. So even if it does paint you in a bad light, it doesn't matter anyway. So again, it's a numbers game. They know it will probably do well. If they weren't painted in a bad light like that, it wouldn't do as well anyway. You know, people thrive off negativity in the content creation space and online. So, you know, it doesn't surprise me. But
also the lines are somewhat blurred, right? Because they're not coming out and saying, okay, you have to do this because of this and this is scandalous. It's even still done in a way where they can defend it to a certain level, right? And there's no way in telling what their intentions were. Of course, we can sit there as fans and we can derive probably the truth from it. But when Hunter Campbell's saying, okay, if you fight Sean O'Malley, it's a big fight. You've been looking incredible recently. If you win, you get all the crossover of his fan base. None of those things are wrong. They're not wrong, and they're very, very defendable. So even if they were to be asked about them, it's very, very easy to paint over those cracks because it still makes sense from their perspective, right? So I think it's sort of a win-win from them. So I think it's quite good. But as you were saying about what was coming up.
Yeah, so going into our content creator lives, because obviously we do love MMA and we also love content creation based around mixed martial arts. So you know the drill. I'm going to pick your brain a little bit. What's been going on in Thailand? Obviously, you don't have too much time left there. I know you've been preparing for 304 and your big mega plan, if you will, for your return back to England. What's the week looking like for you, past and future?
Honestly, at the moment, the easiest way I could explain this is I've pretty much cleared my schedule as much as I can and just put social media on TikTok specifically and UFC Manchester at the very, very forefront. And everything else comes after that. So every single day from now until then is basically with those two things at the forefront of my priority. So this week is pretty much just trying to organize as many of the things that I'm going to look to give away. So some posters, a few branding things which we spoke about before, and then just in the background working on perfecting the prototypes of some of the clothes. And that's one of the trickiest parts of what I'm navigating at the moment, because there are a lot of steps to that and there are a lot of barriers to overcome. But I'm really just trying to work in the background of perfecting that so that when they get into people's hands, it's not necessarily going to be the best it's ever going to be, because of course anything improves over time. But it's going to be something which I'm very, very proud of to do, because I'm at a point where I have direct contacts and I have people even messaging me in my inbox for particular garments, for particular Muay Thai shorts or basketball sets or t-shirts that are of quite a particular status in society or online, that if I or when they go into the hands of them, I can't allow that to be subpar. I can't allow that to be a poor representation of what I'm trying to create.
A gonna have to jump in there. You can't drop that. I mean, are you allowed to say any names? Is that possible? If not, don't worry.
It's not necessarily a ton of specific people, but there's people, for example, like we've discussed before, someone who's followed the page for a very long time in Marcus Hennes, who plays for Ipswich, who's on the newsletter for the drops of the clothes, who follows the clothing thing. We speak every now and again, engages with all the content. So the clothing going to the likes of him. People like a training partner of Andrew Tate, who is very big into Muay Thai, who also trains a lot in Thailand, who I speak to occasionally, who's engaging a lot with the Muay Thai shorts. So I'm going to naturally get a pair to him. So there's people of status that I can't afford for when these garments go into the hands of them to be subpar. They have to be of a certain
They look good to me. But I don't even do Muay Thai. I don't even do Muay Thai, and I wanted them. So that's a testament, bro. They look clean.
I appreciate that. But the thing behind that is, if I take a photo from a distance and kind of polish a few things, it paints over the cracks a little bit. But when I have them in my hand, up close and personal, there's a lot of tweaks that I still need to make behind the scenes. So they don't look too bad for now, but in regards to the actual final piece that I want to have before it goes out to people, there's a lot of work to do. And of course, when you're doing anything like this, the lead times can always be quite lengthy, and I don't have a lot of time to play with. So everything is running on quite a tight schedule at the moment, but that's pretty much what I'm fixated on without going into any of the granular details. Is more so,
mate, I can't wait.
A couple of the socials and then the house. But how about yourself?
And I saw well, no, just quickly before I jump onto me, I saw you trickling the first few pieces of content on Instagram, obviously showcasing the casuals calling, talking about giving it away and giving away some merch. I can see the seeds being applied for the next few weeks, so I'm excited to see what's happening. Big things for you. And on my end, I'm not going to sit here and say it's anything abnormal, but yeah, again, it's just adjusting to the new workload, and while being away from home and trying to get used to the new setup. It's a little bit half-fisted. Learning, practicing, just harnessing or honing rather the writing craft and everything in between. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I'm doing besides the normal weekly run. I guess planning over the next few weeks is going to be awkward because I've had a lot of mixed schedules in terms of my video releases. I think just as everything elevates and as everything grows exponentially, it requires a lot more responsibility. Whether that's because there's a bigger audience relying on you, waiting for your content. Obviously, I've been seeing that with the live streams. People miss when the live streams aren't there, which is crazy to say. And obviously that audience is growing. The live streams have been doing really well recently. We've been averaging, probably when I first started, we were averaging about 10 people, 10 to 15 people. Now it's doubled that. So it's double that, if not more. A couple of streams ago, we were averaging about 40 people in there at once, and that was pretty much consistent for the whole stream, which is crazy to say. So this is all part of the plan, though. We have to think long term with these sort of things, but it's also just trying to innovate, trying to think of ways to evolve each sort of area of expertise I'm working in, so how I can make the streams more engaging and less repetitive. Same with the videos, graphic design, every single aspect of the content grind. I'm just trying to improve little by little, and as you say, getting the reps in. I'm taking a page out of your book in that regard, but. Yeah, also planning on launching the talking channel as well. Still hasn't happened yet, but I've had it set up. I know I've been talking about it and touting it for a few weeks now.
The irony of something setting up a talking channel and always talking about it, but the talking channel never...
Don't do that. Don't do that to me.
The irony of talking about said talking channel. I want to ask you on, because when I flicked through them the other day, the international channels you have are doing really well. There's a lot of videos that have gone very viral.
I know. It's pretty crazy, isn't it?
It's pretty good. It's exactly like your voice.
I know. I don't like watching the videos because it's like hearing me, but not me, speaking Portuguese or Arabic. It's wild. And I'd be the first one to say, I spoke about this on stream as well, is obviously the company I work with, so they use AI to replicate my voice. And normally in AI instances, I'm very... Not what's the word I'm looking for? Not pessimistic, apprehensive of its usage. But I think it's depending on where it is. And I use AI in my own workflow in terms of just minor things on Canva. Canva has some really good AI tools just for simple stuff like upscaling images that are low quality and just little things like that. Obviously, something like that, you know, in terms of recreating voices, is a little bit of a step up. But at the end of the day, it's my content. It's still me. It's still my edited video. It's still got the same, you know, it's still got the same level of integrity for the most part. Obviously, you can't capture it perfectly with AI, but obviously that will change. I think we'll be at some point where you'll be able to tell. We're not even far off that, right? So I'm okay with it, and I'm glad, you know, it opens my videos up to a load of more people. So it's kind of crazy to see how well it's doing. It took a month or two to really kick off, but we've just launched 3 more channels, or two channels in German and I think in Dutch as well. So pretty crazy, but exciting. As I said, just expanding and elevating, probably the 2 words I would use to describe the process right now. It's exciting. It's very exciting.
Yeah, I think when you look at AI, I think the most important takeaway from it should be, this is here to streamline and make more efficient and effective anything I do. And depending on how you want to use it is dependent on how it's going to streamline. But when you start seeing the utility of what it can have in your work, it is crazy. And there's so many usages for content creators, from idea generation to the actual graphics, like you said at the end, even very, very small things which people wouldn't necessarily think about, like what you said, upscaling images at a high quality. That's not what comes to mind when people think of AI, but it's these sort of details which are really starting to improve the process. And it's definitely something I'm continually trying to get better at, because what you realize is the more time you spend in building whatever it may be that you're building, you start realizing that you need to get good at either outsourcing or making more efficient tasks which require time that are not necessarily you doing your innate skill. So every second you spend not writing or not telling a story is not maximized, because you would work best if everything else could be taken care of and you just spent all your time thinking, writing, and everything else was taken care of. I'm dramatizing this a little bit, but
of course,
it's the same for me, right? It's the same for what I'm realizing. I get maximized return if I can spend all my time and attention on creating videos, on creating content for my platforms. So even just today and yesterday, I spent outsourcing, looking for a personal assistant just to help me with a few tasks that I have in a day, which are pretty much things that I could automate. If I can automate these out, they don't require any original skill. They don't require any original thought. They're just small operational things I need done in the background that essentially now is a waste of my time, because I can then put that time or reinvest that time back into the thing which gets me most return or bang for my buck, if you like, which would be recording videos. So I think that's important to know, is at the start when you're doing these things, you essentially have to do everything for yourself, and there's utility to that because you start understanding all elements of what you're doing. But it gets to a point where you can slowly start outsourcing things, and that usually comes when you start making more money and you can free up more money to outsource. But also, as AI improves, you can start doing this for free or little cost, right? So I think that's a major change.
I would even say you can start something like that with a PA. You wouldn't even need to. I think you could probably do that now. A lot of those things now using ChatGPT or a combination of various AI tools. But I think the main crux of AI, because it's not going anywhere, I think people who don't accept that are behind. You have to accept that it's not going anywhere. It's only going to be here to stay. It's only going to elevate and grow and get better. So I think you need to get on board with it in some capacity, even if you might not ethically agree with some of it. I feel like you'd be a fool, particularly in what we're doing, where pretty much the responsibility, as you said, for everything we do falls on our shoulders until later down the line. It'd be stupid not to take advantage of it, right? And yeah, the main thing I was going to say was it shouldn't be used to necessarily create, as in from nothing. From nothing, it should be used to elevate. It should be used to enhance and elevate what's already there. I think that's the best way we can make use of AI right now, because I think obviously there's always the big controversy in around art is AI generated art, because it's based on other people's work, and it's founded essentially from nothing. You're going from no image to a completely, lack of human. There's no human involved in that process necessarily.
Incorrect.
Okay, counter, please. You understand what I'm saying, though? Obviously, there is human in terms of extreme humans, but
I'm being extreme on this point, but I do believe it. You say there's no human element to that. That's actually fundamentally wrong, because the whole thing about AI is, I understand the point that people are making in regards to it's based off other people's work. Okay, cool. I don't really get why that makes much difference, to be honest. I think if you're an artist and you believe in what you do, I don't understand why you would be threatened by AI. You should be excited by it, if anything, because it's only going to be able to further enhance what you do. And that doesn't necessarily mean just in regards to the artwork, but it can be the back end of what you do with that and how you can use that to elevate your brand and income and all these different things. But if you take two people and one is seriously well versed in prompts and understanding AI technology and how to get the best out of it, and you take person A who's never used it, you're not going to get great artwork out of both of them. You're not, because there is still a large element of human involvement, because you have to understand how to use these platforms to get the most out of them. So I'm not saying it's the exact same as someone going away and drawing a photo, but there is still a level of skill which is not going to be, person A is not going to be able to curate incredible graphics if they know nothing about prompt engineering, because person B, who understands what to ask for and how to ask for it, is going to be very different. If you sat in a room with Lex Fried and you had person A who had no interest in anything and just sat in an office all day and had a very monotonous job and no interest, and then on the flip side, you have a highly intellectual person who is great at understanding questions and people, you're going to derive a lot more information from person B than you are person A, despite the fact that the outcome is still Lex Friedman being in front. So that's just me being a little bit dramatic, but it's important to understand, because you have to get good at prompt engineering. But yeah, there's a lot of utility to it. But I think it's probably a good place to wrap up on, unless there was anything that
of AI too much, I have to say, because realistically, not just us, but anyone could speak about that topic, I think, for hours at this point in,
for sure,
in the grand scale of time, because we're really at the advent of where AI is the crux of it all. It's about to explode. It has not already. So that's the topic that we could spend 5 episodes waffling on about. But yeah, this has been the MMA Creators Podcast. I believe this is episode number 54 now, and apologies for this going out on a Monday. We should be to our regularly scheduled programming next week for Sunday, where I will be back in my usual spot with much better sounding audio. But thank you for listening, and we'll see you soon. Cheers.